I understand why you agreed to join the governor's office, but we truly miss you as a senator. In fact, we know that you're there, but we don't see you. But as I just told you, I've learned to recognize your truck. Andy was elected to the Senate in January of 2013. It was a magical year. He and Representative Kipowitz were elected the same year, so one in one house and one in the other. Because Andy was a member of the Senate Appropriations Committees and the Higher Education Committee, he became a legislator whose SUAA really needed to get to know, and we did. We still appreciate all your efforts and support to higher education. In January of 2021, Andy resigned the Senate to take a position as senior advisor to Governor Pritzker. And like I said, even though we don't see you much anymore, we know how helpful you can be, starting recently with CIP. Today, I want to personally thank you for getting the ball rolling to fix the college insurance program, and the governor for wanting to make sure CIP didn't continue as a fiscal failure for community college retirees. This audience also appreciates your efforts, as this has been a long-standing, frustrating problem. Many of you already know that Andy holds a BA in History from Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville. Yay, University Colleges, universities in Illinois. We're batting 1,000 today. He is married and has 3 children. He resides in Bunker Hill, just a small town down the road a bit from Springfield. Deputy Governor Manar, it's your turn.
It's afternoon. Good afternoon. It's great to be back before you. I don't remember when the last time was that I was here, but regardless, I appreciate Linda's invitation and the opportunity just to talk for a few minutes to your group. Let me start by saying it's always a pleasure to be in front of educators. What you do changes the world. You solve the world's problems each and every day, and I want to recognize that on the outset. So thank you for what you do. It's great to see my former colleague from the General Assembly, Representative Kipowitz, who is a champion for SUAA in the General Assembly every day. I didn't realize that we were elected the same year, actually. I thought you had predated me by a term. But Stephanie is a great voice for public education in the House, and the administration enjoys working with her on so many issues. So thank you again for the invite. As you may know, the state is fresh off of celebrating our 5th balanced budget in a row. Thank you. 5 in a row in many states wouldn't be a feat, but in Illinois it is, because we went through so many tumultuous years, but we are in so much better shape. I know that after decades of fiscal mismanagement, it can be difficult to wrap your mind around an Illinois where we actually spend our money wisely. But make no mistake, under Governor Pritzker, we are doing that, and we are doing even more today. Fiscal discipline is and will continue to be the governor's first priority in office. His top priority was restoring fiscal sanity in a state that had fallen into neglect under the previous governor. Just 6 years ago, our state had $17 billion in unpaid bills waiting to be paid in the comptroller's office. Think about that for a moment. $17 billion waiting to be paid by the comptroller. Public pensions were being threatened. Human service providers were closing their doors. Health care bills weren't being paid. We all know what that world looked like. Today, though, we have no bill backlog. No bill backlog whatsoever. Our Our once depleted rainy day fund, which doesn't get talked about often enough, but it is a source of pride and it is a focus of the governor, will soon sit at over $2 billion so that we have that available for the next rainy day. We've received 8 credit upgrades as a state. We are making pension payments beyond our required contribution, and we have paid off over $10 billion in debt in the last 2 years alone. $10 billion in debt over the last 2 years. My quick math on the drive over was that's about, I think, $12 million a day in debt. Our economy has grown. Today, the state's economy has surpassed $1 trillion in GDP. Matter of fact, if Illinois were its own country, we would have the 18th largest economy in the world. Today, we have built a state government that is intentional and responsible in everything that we do. We have experts in their fields, leading state agencies to find solutions to our most complex and challenging problems. As I mentioned a moment ago, we have received 8 credit upgrades by the credit rating agencies. Back in March, when Moody's, one of those agencies issued their most recent upgrade, they actually do this in writing and they issue a report, and I want to pull a quote out from that last report from Moody's for you to think about today. This is what Moody's said, quote, "We consider improving governance to be a key consideration in this action," end quote. Improving governance. Illinois, according to Moody's back in March, is, quote, "displaying improved management of its budget by making conservative revenue assumptions and applying surplus revenue towards the payment of debt and the growth of reserves." I'll say that one more time. Illinois is displaying improved management of its budget by making conservative revenue assumptions and applying surplus revenues toward the payment of debt and the growth in reserves. That's what Moody's said of Illinois. Illinois is finally on a solid footing, and that's why we are now able to make the most important investments in our greatest resource, which is our people. With the budget that was just signed into law a few days ago, we've increased investment in education from preschool to higher education and added new funding for economic and workforce development to help our economy continue to grow. Now, you may not know this about me, maybe until Linda mentioned it. Did you mention I was a teacher? No. You did not. You said my bachelor's degree. Okay, I was a mayor. That was a long time ago, though. Really long time ago. But I did start, it does. Learned a lot there. I started my career in teaching, and I have 3 children in public school. Actually, I should amend my remarks. I have 2 children in high school, and my daughter Abby just graduated high school, and she's going to attend Southern Illinois University starting in the fall, which is my alma mater. I usually don't amend those remarks because it reveals to myself my true age, actually. Like you know this firsthand, and I've seen this firsthand, that there's no greater investment for our children and our future as a state and as a country than in public education. There's no greater investment than we can make than in public education, and that's something that the governor has led on and will continue to lead on. With this budget, going back to his introduced budget back in February, that was approved by the General Assembly, we're making it possible for nearly every student from a low, moderate, or middle-income family to get a degree or a certification from any one of our state's 48 community colleges, tuition-free in Illinois. With the state providing a record $750 million in college scholarships next year, eligible students can now utilize a state scholarship with a federal Pell Grant and pay their tuition with no out-of-pocket costs. At long last, Illinois students can get a quality college education right here in Illinois without being saddled with insurmountable debt for the rest of their lives, while also giving them the ability to put away more money for retirement at the outset. That was a goal of the governor that was passed by the General Assembly, and it is now law in Illinois. In addition, our new state budget officially grows direct support for higher education institutions to an all-time high in fiscal year '24. We're stepping up our funding for higher education by an additional $285 million, including a $100 million increase for higher education institutions in our public universities, the largest dollar and percent increase for higher education in more than 20 years. We're also investing in modernizing classrooms and infrastructure on our campuses. Our university campuses are economic engines across the state, and our bipartisan Rebuild Illinois Capital Plan dedicates $2.8 billion to university and community college infrastructure across Illinois. Whether it's renovations or deferred maintenance, refurbishments of buildings, replacing windows or roofs, the things that a lot of people don't pay attention to, we know it's important in the Pritzker administration, and the governor has prioritized that. Students and faculty deserve high-quality facilities to grow and teach effectively, and all across Illinois, we are delivering on just that. I want to make this point before I close. All of those things that I just went through, each of those things, MAP grants at a record level, a record increase in both dollar amount and percentage increases for higher education, both at the community college level and at our public universities, paying more into the pension system than the law requires, which is a first for Illinois. Those things can be done and balance the budget at the same time. That is the governor's goal, and that's what we have achieved again for a fifth year, and that's what we're going to continue to do. Good government allows us to make investments in what matters the most, our people. Though these are just a few of the many important investments included in the budget this year, in fiscal year '24, which starts on July 1st, they are investments that lay the groundwork to support Illinoisans today and for decades to come. After years of neglect, Illinois is finally investing in our future. With that, I'm happy, and I didn't tell Linda this, I'm happy to take any questions you might have for a few minutes. Yes, sir.
Be elected senator from Bunker Hill as a Democrat, in and of itself, is quite a feat.
Thank you.
When I talk to individuals about their future, I ask them, what do you see yourself doing 5, 10, 15 years from now? So, Deputy Governor Manar, do you see yourself in a President Pritzker Administration in 2028?
Well, I would not have guessed this was going to be the leadoff question. I'll just tell you that right now. I will tell you this. It's been, I know many folks in the room here over the years, and my transition to work away from being an elected official was the first time that had happened in a couple of decades. As Linda mentioned, I was elected mayor. I was actually on the city council in Bunker Hill when I was 21 years old, which a lot more time in the rearview mirror there than one might expect in elective office. So when I made the transition to work for the governor, I got, frankly, more than what I expected from him as an individual and as a public official. He gets up every day and works hard for the people of the state. I'm an early riser. You know, I have a boss that gets up before I do, which was a first for me, frankly. We were on the phone this morning at 6 a.m., to talk about a couple of things that were happening this week. So I will just tell you this. Governor Pritzker gets up every single day and focuses on solving problems in the state, and he's going to continue to do that regardless of politics and you know, how things unfold nationally.
And your kids will be out of high school.
Yes.
You will be a free man.
I don't think so. I'm gonna write that down. All right. Yes.
I really appreciate everything that's been made towards like funding and all of that sort of thing. But I do have a question about like the residential insurance. Like it's taking 2
Yes.
with more planning?
Yes, and we've had, I will tell you, we've had many conversations about that leading up to the passage of the budget I guess it's been a couple of weeks now. Go back to the figure I used in my remarks, 10 billion in debt. So that number is comprised of some obvious things, like we did some short-term borrowing years ago. We paid that off early to save interest. Those we paid off. The backlog of bills, got rid of those in the last 2 years. Counted in there will be those things like dental bills that aren't being paid. Our goal is to complete, and we're almost there. I mean, we're 99 point something of the way there, and there are a few outstanding items that have real impact on people. So our goal is to once and for all this fiscal year eliminate those things. Yeah. All right. Yes, sir.
Yes, how much benefit or impact did the COVID dollars over the last 3 years have, depending on the state budget? And now that that's over, how's it look moving forward?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Without a doubt, the federal government pumping money into the economy of not just Illinois but across the country helped tremendously. So we saw that benefit most predominantly on the back end with tax receipts. Generally, during COVID, consumers moved from service spending, which we generally do not tax in Illinois, to goods, which we do tax. So we saw the benefit of that. But I should be clear about this. None of the federal money, all the things that I just went through, none of the federal money was used to balance the budget. That's a misnomer. It's an easy thing for folks to latch onto that don't like to see the states be successful, frankly. But none of the money that we received through CARES or ARPA or the other programs that the federal government adopted was used to accomplish the things I just mentioned. If you look at reporting that we do, the state has received national accolades for how transparent and open its report. I'm going to say that one more time. Illinois is receiving national accolades for being transparent and open on how federal money through the pandemic has been spent. But if you look generally, we used it on response to public health concerns. We used it on agency spending that was related to activities that they had to take on because of COVID. And we used it to pay off a very large chunk, billions of dollars of unemployment insurance trust fund debt. And that, again, was a request of the governor of the legislature. The governor's request wasn't go spend COVID dollars on things that aren't related to the pandemic. The governor's request was consistent with how he approaches the rest of the budget, which is let's start with what we need to do first. And in that case, paying off billions of dollars worth of debt that otherwise would have been placed on employers in the state was a good move, and I think that's why it received wide support from the General Assembly. Yep. Yes, sir.
Some of our chapters were in our legislators were on a party or associate with, and some of those legislators may be elected in so relative to your former experience in the state session, do you have any advice for us as to
Sure. Illinois is diverse in its politics. We all know that. We have large urban centers. We have vast rural areas in the state. The governor approaches this. He doesn't approach one legislator differently than another. He has quite a few meetings with legislators of both parties. This year, I would tell you there was a concerted effort to try to achieve a bipartisan vote on a budget, and despite the fact that many of the things that Republican legislators advocated for were included in the final budget, despite the fact that that was done, for whatever reason, and you can probably ask them yourself, there were no votes from the Republican Party. be that as it may, you know, what I would suggest is tell your story. When I was privileged to serve in the state Senate, I found what was most effective was not a form letter, you know, probably not you know, a blast email of any type. Not to say that you shouldn't forward everything Linda tells you to. But I think telling your story, your personal story, you know, whether it's you know, the impact of not having dental bills paid, or you know, maybe you go into a building at a community college or university that needs HVAC replacement, and it's impacting how you can do your job and how effective you can be in terms of providing public education. I think telling a story is the most effective, and that's what I find to be the most meaningful in, you know, in a democracy where there's all these competing interests going after the same thing, essentially. So I would just say tell your story. I think you're very fortunate to have a statewide organization that has a very strong presence here in Springfield at the state capitol with both the legislative branch and the executive branch. CIP would be a good example of how your voice helped that effort. And the state and everyone, I think, is going to be better off because of that compromise. But tell your story. I think that's the best thing to do. Anything else? Yes, sir.
Because I know now you're very much aware of a long-standing myth about all of our tax dollars are going to Chicago and
Yeah.
Conf. How can we do a better job of explaining to people that they are getting benefits, in fact, in many cases, more
Yeah.
than what they're saying? How can we do a better job of getting that message out to people? I mean, I've seen charts in the past, but they're sometimes hard to come by.
Yeah.
But you hear this argument all the time.
Yeah, I think it's great question, Pete. I feel like I have a little more leeway than most answering this question because I live in a town of 1,708 people. But I point to the Paul Simon Public Policy Institute work that has been done on this. Very, very clean, very easy to read work that shows that it's not just a myth, it's a complete fallacy. It's just a fallacy. So I think being blunt about it is the best route. Even through blunt conversation, sometimes though, reality just doesn't take hold. Some people are going to believe what they want to believe for convenience purposes. You know, it's hard to accept some things in very challenging and very complicated debates. So what I think we do better at, though, in the state is to step back away from conversations that are regional in nature. I saw this during the school funding debate. You know, I had that bill for I don't know how long. I lost hair, you know, and got gray hair through that. I don't say that for a blue ribbon, but I say that because, you know, what I always tried to do through that debate was pull everyone back to we are one state, and what's good for Chicago is good for Carbondale. And what's good for Decatur is good for Rockford. It's good for Waukegan. When Illinois grows, we all grow. And that could be sparked by success in one community or success in another community. And we tend to make sense of a very diverse state by dividing people. And I think it's good to point out the truth. I do. That is a complete fallacy. But I also think you have to follow that up with, we are one state. And when Chicago grows, that by nature helps every program that you care about in Southern Illinois. It by nature helps support every program that deals with rural public education, the communications building at SIU Carbondale, whether it's expanding the dental school at SIU Edwardsville, or whether it's building a park in Bunker Hill. When Chicago grows, it by nature helps those efforts. On the flip side, we can say the same thing. So we are one state, it's a diverse state. We are as representative of the country as any other state. That there is inherent strength there. And for far too many years, we've had a lot of politicians run around the state seeking success through division. And we should just say no to that. As downstaters, we should just say no, thank you. Yes.
We were talking about rural education, and I know there's evidence-based funding
Yep.
for schools across the state of Illinois now to get more equity between the public schools, depending on, not just on their tax basis here. What's the governor feel like, is that being funded to get
Yeah.
that up to where it needs to be over what was it, 5 or 10?
Yeah, it's actually a little bit more than a decade. So that was the bill I was referencing. The governor's introduced budget in February called for $350 million to go into the new, I keep saying new system, it's been in effect since 2018, but, and the General Assembly approved that. That money is directed first toward the most underfunded districts, which is a completely different system than the system that existed before. And I mean, back to the question about geography in the state, I don't want to overgeneralize, but there is inherent benefit there for rural districts, just like there is for urban districts that are underfunded. So the answer is yes. We're on a path to get to full funding. It's a dynamic math equation that recognizes costs. That costs in a community with a poverty rate of in the single digits to get the same outcome are very different than a community that has 30, 40, 50% poverty. It takes different resources to get the same outcome, which is what we all expect for every child. So the answer is yes. The governor is a very proud proponent of evidence-based funding. His budget called for what the law requires, or not requires, but calls for, $350 million of new spending. So we are well on our way to getting there. And I just tell you from my own perspective, in Bunker Hill, Community Unit School District number 8, what just that little bit of funding can do to change the lives of children it's monumental. The other thing is it's stable now, right? So we don't have these wild ups and downs and are we going to have funding or are we not going to have funding? Do I have to riff these teachers or do I take a chance and keep them on? The upheaval, the instability is almost completely, been removed from the system. So we've injected new money that gets to the neediest districts first, and we've injected stability into the system. And that is one great combo for public schools in the state. All right, anything else? All right, it's great to see you. Thank you all for having me back. Hopefully this was informative for you. Thank you.
Thanks for watching, and if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel. And while you're at it, please leave us a comment. Thank you for watching.